Welcome. I'm Catherine Fox, Atlanta art critic and the founder of artsatl.org, which is an online journal of the arts in Atlanta. And I'm here to moderate a conversation among the important people behind Charlotte, an animated film that is a presentation of the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. First, I'd like to introduce our guests. Tahir Rana is an Emmy-nominated director in animation. Charlotte is his first feature film. He started his career at DreamWorks Animation and has since been head of story and director for series television, including Angry Birds, currently in production at Netflix. Eric Warin, who co-directed a film with Tahir, has directed the animated films Alex and the Ghost and Ballerina, co-directed with Eric Sommer. He was born in France, graduated from the École des Beaux-Arts in Nantes. David Besmogis is the screenplay writer, which he wrote with Eric Rutherford. He's an award-winning writer and filmmaker. His work includes film features Victoria Day and Natasha, which is an adaptation of one of his stories. He was born in Riga, Latvia, and lives in Toronto, where he is creative director of the Humber School for Writers. This was really a remarkable film, and I was only barely aware of Charlotte's Element, which made it even more of a revelation. But on doing some research, I realized that she had been a subject of many presentations for the last 40 years, films, books, plays, even in opera. So I'm wondering what it was that you all felt that you could do different in telling her story.
David, you should go ahead since you're the first man on the project, and I can jump in after.
Sure. I suppose I was the first man on the project in that Julia Rosenberg, who's the producer, is an old friend, good friend. And I know Julia has been developing this project for a long time, and in fact has loved Charlotte and has been influenced by her since she was, I think she got it as her bat mitzvah present, Life for Theater, and it's been with her all this time. And she's wanted to tell the story of Charlotte. So despite what you've said, which is true, there have been productions about her. The first thing you said is also true, which is that she still seems to be not very well known. And I think what Julia hoped to do through animation, which hasn't been done before for Charlotte, which in a way makes, doing it as an animated feature makes sense because she was a visual artist. And I think what Julia had hoped to do was to create an accessible film that would appeal to younger audiences, people, Charlotte's age, when Charlotte was coming of age as an artist, and also to grown-ups, because over the course of the film, we see her come of age and become a mature artist, and to tell that story. And I guess also to tell it in 2022, which is where we are now, 2021, I think an awareness that the people who had lived through the Holocaust, that generation was, dying, no longer with us. And the perpetuation of the memory of the Holocaust through this story, I think, seemed important.
Thank you. Tahir, did you have something to add?
Yeah, maybe just to echo a little bit of what David was saying. I think other iterations of Charlotte's story certainly do exist, as you've alluded to, but I still feel pretty strongly that the world's awareness of who Charlotte was and her story and her talent is just cosmically underrated in terms of there still isn't enough awareness of Charlotte Solomon. So in creating this film, more so than trying to do something different than what has existed in the past, it is really just to continue telling her story and making audiences around the world aware of that legacy that is so important. And we feel pretty strongly that, using a medium like animation, which David alluded to, was really the best way to go ahead and do that, to kind of tell her story to the world.
I noticed that there were many different sort of approaches. Some images were photographs, some images were or looked like photographs, some were very simple, some were there were more pastel shades. And I read that you introduced some innovative techniques to make this film, and I was wondering if you could talk about that a little.
I'll touch on that also. I think I was most heavily involved with that aspect. So we used a couple of different software programs that are typically used for 2D animation. But what we really wanted to do was elevate the medium to be something worthy of the big screen, feature quality level. So we leveraged the 2D software that existed, which is something that is very much a computer-driven process. But we combine that with old school, traditional hand-drawn animation, which is not used that heavily these days. So in combining the processes, what we tried to do was create something that would look quite substantial, and would be able to be projected on big screens, and audiences would be able to enjoy, but still use the software processes that would help us kind of keep our costs lower. So in combining the two, we sort of coined the term digital animation, which is a sort of portmanteau of traditional and digital. And in doing so, I'm hoping we were quite successful with creating something that was very artistic. In terms of what is on the screen, we did use Charlotte's paintings, as well as our own designs, and we kind of blended them together. Charlotte's paintings were especially important during transition sequences, really seeing her brush strokes come alive, like the pastels that you referred to. But so that was just another sort of element of the sort of process and the R&D, if you would, of how we kind of built the film.
So Eric, what does it mean to be a director of an animated film?
It's well, to be a director, you have a story that has been given to you, and you're trying to merge emotion, to merge the story, the rhythm, the techniques, the money of the budget, and what's going to be the music, and you work with all that, and you have to make sure that and to take in consideration that the audience is going to go through those mountains and enjoy and feel all the pain, all the emotions that have been written in the script, and that we want to show and help the audience to feel. That's really that.
Did you direct the actors?
We kind of, when I arrived, most of the lines had been already said. So I didn't start from the beginning. So when I arrived, there was some performance already done. So I had to take them, use them as much as I can, because here is the process in animation. You record the sound, you record the voices, and then you can work with those voices. They're still, you can work them. You can cut differently. You can accentuate few things. So suddenly, one sentence which has a meaning, you have some bandwidth there. So I've been working a lot on that, and as you know, we did the movie during the we started without the COVID. In the middle of it, we had this in the world, and it changed lots of things. That's the way we directed voices. We started to work from home or apart. So doing the editing remotely and everything. So we had to face lots of new ways to work, and so basically all the recording has been done at people's home, and some of them were directed by the producer, some of them were directed by themselves, and then we had also a few changes in the story, so to be adjusted to just because by re-editing or editing the story, we started to see that there was some things that were too long or not explained enough, so we wanted to enhance some part of it, and that's how it's been done.
So the actors record, so the animation has to match the voice of the actors in terms of pauses and expression.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So that's why we record the voices, and then the animator have that in. They have the recording and work from that, but there's still lots of interpretation, so that you can enhance something or suddenly turn it to something slightly different, but then it creates something else sometimes way more interesting and everything.
Okay. David, is writing a screenplay for an animated film different from writing a regular screenplay?
It was the first time I've done it. I've written regular screenplays. I thought that it would be very different in the sense that you would think that the world would, be so expansive. You could do anything. People could, fly, you could go to different locations, but the limitations that you have in live action wouldn't exist. Well, it's not entirely true. As I discovered, there are still limitations of, what needs to be drawn and that sort of thing. But some things are possible, and especially with a subject like Charlotte and depicting her art, some of the transitions, for instance, you could do these, sort of dreamlike, whimsical, like magical sorts of things that you couldn't do in live action. And everything is driven by story. It's like, form follows function. So once we figured out what the narrative arc of the story needed to be, then it's like, okay, how creative can we get with the visuals? And I think that was, from a cinematic standpoint, really exciting. I mean, I was trained as a filmmaker, and I still believe, even though, in this instance, I'm writing a screenplay, I think the best film is a silent film. So, as much as the visuals could drive the story, that was always the hope. And I think there are really long sequences where the film does that, where we understood what the story is, but it moves visually. And the directors and the animators did a really phenomenal job with the compositions and things like that. I think in particular, they're the transitions, which the pastel things that you alluded to. It's like, how do you move from sequence to sequence, right? Without it being
Changing scenes.
Yeah. What are the transitions? Transitions are always really hard. Yeah, exactly. Transitions are hard, and how do you make them not prosaic? How do you make, there's a writer I love, Leonard Michaels, who talked about, turning transitions into transformations. And I think that's what Charlotte is doing from scene to scene. There's that long sequence where this is going to play after people have seen the film, where Charlotte is deliberating as to what she's going to do about her grandfather. That is like, I don't know how long that is. The directors would know better than I would, but it feels like a 3-4 minute scene where it's so visual. And I think that could be done with live action, but I think there's an extra element through animation that really heightens it. So I think, you have to use the tools that are available to you. This is an animated feature. And I think that was exciting also to discover what it could do, which I didn't know at the beginning.
Are you familiar with some of these other interpretations of her story? Did you do any research? So who did you work with in deciding what the narrative arc would be, and how did you decide what to emphasize and what to omit?
So the script, Eric had done passes of the script. We didn't work together. We worked in sequence, which often happens in film. You know, a writer or writing team develops a project, and then somebody else, you know, can take it over. So there was a storyline and a form that was developed. But then, you know, it was trying to figure out, what are we going to emphasize? Charlotte's story is so complex, and it covers so much time and territory. The question is, what are you going to focus on? And so I think there are really at least two major strands in this thing. One is her as an artist, which is important. And the other is her family history and the darkness of, you know, the history of chronic suicide in this family. And it's like, how do you tell that story? And overall is the Holocaust, right? So I guess really three things. And how do you tell those, you know, three strands of a story and integrate them? I think that was always the challenge. So, you know, I'll let the director speak to that as well. Mm-hmm. But I think that was, you know, trying to figure out how to tell that in a kind of comprehensive but also seamless way, because there really is so much there. And I think that, you know, it was a really challenging story. Though she lived to be only, you know, in her late 20s, a lot of life happened for Charlotte. And it's like, how do you tell that?
And a lot of history.
And a lot of history.
Do either of you want to comment on that or elaborate on that?
Yeah, I have. I think I absolutely agree with David in the fact that it's all about point of view, specifically on such a life, and what are we going to emphasize or not, But I would, you know, to answer again to your question about what is directing, it's also what's going to be the point of view of some things and how you're going to choose to enhance or not. And there is something I always said when I was doing this was actually, Charlotte, this movie is a lot about choices and how sometimes, or specifically in the beginning, we see that she doesn't have the rules of her life. People decide for herself. And that's the arc that she's always trying to please her family. They are always taking some decisions for her. And that's very how we see this character growing up, where she eventually decides for herself when she steps on and says that she's going to draw the story of her life and try to fight this internal disease inside the family. What is very interesting, when you see the story through these things, you realize how much it was cruel that she has to decide for her grandfather's life as well. So, you know, this ultimate move is done not because she wants to do it, but because she has to do it. And I would say that real freedom in all her life was really to decide to go in heart and to go and draw the story of her life and go over this disease. And even at the end, she doesn't decide, actually.
Right. I mean, I would also say on the subject of if you want to call it the mercy killing or the murder of her grandfather, that is a very controversial. First of all, historically, it's believed that this is true, but nobody actually knows. I mean, there are indicators that you know that this is what she did. But I think the challenge.
I thought she told somebody that she did this. No.
She actually wrote a confession letter that was discovered, believe it or not, while I think the film was in development. Julie has that story, so it had to be sort of a quick pivot in terms of the story that we were telling, but the actual intention, I think, is what David's referring to. Is it's unclear why she did it. So the film that we what we wanted to kind of put forth to the audience is, what do you think? I mean, and honestly, Catherine, I can even ask you the question, like, did it appear, that this was a grandfather who was in this world that was passing him by, and he wasn't able to live in it anymore? He was in pain, and he was starting to show senility. Is that why Charlotte did it, or was there another reason that that you might think?
Well, I read some biographical information about the artist before I watched the movie. And one thing I read was that there was some sexual abuse on the part of this grandfather. And so I brought that to the movie when I watched it, and I felt more strongly about sort of justice of doing that than I might have otherwise felt just having watched that sequence, because he was crabby and cruel.
Yeah.
But is that a killing offense? I don't.
Well, yeah, it's so interesting, and this is sort of outside the scope of the film. Those allegations, again, were sort of like this hot potato that just kind of dropped in our laps. We did work in conjunction with the Charlotte Salman Foundation, and it was sort of under their guidance that we omitted those, because there wasn't any major evidence or any really strong, compelling reason to include that as part of the narrative. Sure, by all accounts, the grandfather was grumbly and surly. He had his reasons for living the way he did and believing in the things and the values that he did, and they came at odds with Charlotte. So perhaps that's motive, but again, it's many people have said, well, he just suffered a major head injury. He was confused, disoriented. It was only a matter of time, and Charlotte was doing what she thought would be the best for him and for everybody involved. So it is interesting sort of how the thoughts on the killing or the euthanasia, whatever you want to say, diverge. It is one of the interesting outcomes, I think, that audiences have, that's interesting to kind of look at.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too, I would want to say, we were creating a film about an actual person, and there were, historical facts that we knew were facts. I also think you have to be careful, I mean, in general, when dealing with an actual person's life, to be as faithful as possible. When you're dealing with this sort of subject matter, by which I mean Holocaust subject matter, I think you have to be as conscientious as possible, because of, sadly, people who are questioning the Holocaust and all that sort of thing. So I think really anything that we included, and we did talk about this a lot, there's crimes by omission and crimes by commission, you know what I mean? And so I don't think we wanted to make any crimes of commission. Omission, you could kind of feel like we weren't sure. There wasn't, absolute proof that he had done this, though we were also being guided by Life with Theater. And there are, there are panels in that, at least one panel for sure in Life with Theater, where the grandfather says, you should sleep with me, meaning like in the same bed, and that it's only natural. So there's definitely something that feels dubious about the way he's depicted. But unless we knew for sure, I think that's a really big statement to make on the life of Charlotte Solomon, which I didn't feel authorized to make. I was very leery of doing that sort of thing. Like, what you read, Catherine, I read that too. But if you're going to put that in a film, you'd better be sure, and because it's going to make, it'll have, I don't want to say an outsized impact, but it'll have a very significant impact and color what happens.
Well, as it colored my viewing of the movie.
And you would also have to set it up like you can't, like there would have to be much more to it.
Right.
Yeah, also it would be another story. I mean, that would be way different, because suddenly this thing is not just like a small event that you just like drop in somewhere. You have, it's just a big stone that you have to build around. So the decision were somewhere else. This movie is not about that at all.
Yeah.
This movie is more about her and something else, but not that.
Yeah, I mean, if we knew for certain, then it colors everything. For instance, why does Charlotte's mother kill herself? Why does Charlotte's aunt kill herself? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the art. Those to me, and maybe it's because of my interest in art, were the movie really came alive when she was drawing, and it seemed visually just more vivid. And I was wondering if that was intentional. And I was also curious about how, of these 800 or more images, how you decided which ones were going to star in the movie, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And just going back to the sort of the history of how we landed on the visual style that we did. Initially, we really wanted Charlotte Solomon's artwork to be the star of the film, and so that a lot of our design sensibility would be informed by the way Charlotte drew and the colors that she used and the vividness. Because, frankly, I mean, her paintings are beautiful to look at. I think criminally underrated in terms of just how well known her art is in the expressionist artistic movement. We kind of came at odds a little bit with trying to design the characters the way Charlotte drew her characters, because they are very exaggerated, and her drawing style is not very anatomically realistic. So in telling a story that was a mature adult drama, we quickly learned that we'd have to design our characters to be a little more realistic looking. So then the question was, okay, well, how do we still feature her paintings, because that's really what we want to do. So that's where we sort of came up with this idea, this thought to use her paintings to transition us through different time periods, different scenes, and frankly, some of the paintings were sort of natural in terms of, okay, this fits right in between these two scenes in terms of its subject matter. I know that Julia and Eric suggested some things just because we like those ones the best. I mean, it's pretty much as objective as that. But I think more so than anything, there was a real concerted effort to show the audiences like, yeah, this is a really amazing artist who was the most prolific artist of the entire Holocaust. As she produced Life of Theater, this grand masterpiece put together in a graphic novel form with suggested musical accompaniment. Like, how ahead of her time is that? It's incredible. I mean, still nothing like Life of Theater really exists. And so really that was our attempt to kind of make her center stage for these brief moments that this transition is happening. There's nothing else on screen but Charlotte's brushstrokes, and deconstructing her paintings to be, to actually see the way she did her underpainting and the way she'd splash on colors and the vividness of the strokes, and just little things like the film never used the color black, which is unusual for an animated film because Charlotte never used black. So those sorts of those are the different kind of ways we try to pay homage to this incredible gifted artist.
Have you seen her works in person? Have any of you seen her works in person?
Yes.
No.
Oh, Eric, I thought you had. Oh no, you
I
you
didn't.
couldn't. David, Julia definitely did a lot of research trips. I'd like to say that our research-related travel was cut short by COVID. Otherwise, it would be an emphatic yes. We all have, but sadly, I don't know if you had David.
No, I hadn't. I mean, I have Life or Theater. I mean, I have the book, so
Yeah.
I
So
would
do we.
imagine I was guided by that. Yeah, but not what you mean, Catherine. No.
It was interesting to me that when she went to school, she was the only expressionist. I mean, of course, the Nazi, their aesthetic was antithetical to expressionism. Of how she even got into the school. I mean, what were they? It seems like as a person who didn't really want to stand out because of her religion, she certainly was fearless in standing out for her aesthetic, because she seemed like a meek person. There was kind of a tension between her sort of social mien, which was kind of meek-ish and obedient, and this passion that came out in her art, and this terrible, I don't know, terrible sense. I'm trying to think of the right artistic word, but I don't know if any of you have thoughts about that.
I think I understand what you mean. I think we have a scene that is underlining something like that. When at the very beginning, she's suggesting something to the family, and they just like throw her away, and she goes to her bedroom and goes on the bed, looks up and sees what she needs to paint. And this scene is very, very useful to explain that art for her was a kind of a way to escape an evasion. So that goes to what you're saying. How was she so polite and respectful, and at the same time being so abstract, or a little bit further in terms of style, just because that was her. She was expressing what she couldn't be inside her family. So that's the way, in an interesting way to see it.
Yeah.
It's like a volcano, sort of. I mean, she erupts in her art, her feelings and passion.
Yeah, that's something that is driving this story in a modern way, in a nowadays way. Despite the fact that she's a girl from the 30s and so on, it's very modern. Lots of young people can relate to that. Are they well treated, heard, considered? How hard it is to take your place in the family, in the decisions and everything. Lots of teenagers are feeling that. Lots of teenagers now go in music or go in something else, but there is always this way of escaping is something that is whatever time universal.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about right now is, as we're having this conversation, there's something that's also quite conspicuous, which is you have three men talking about the life and the artistic development of a young woman. Julia Rosenberg, the producer, had a very large hand in doing this, but it really is also a film about the maturation and artistic development of a young woman who, in that time and place, had all sorts of strictures and limitations. She was from a particular, class where there were expectations on her. She was a Jewish girl in Nazi Germany, so there were further limitations on her. And yeah, to be a young female artist at the time, I think, was difficult. We can see, how many, even of the expressionists, how many of those were women and how many of those are men. So it's also a story of a young woman's coming of age as a woman, and also as an artist. And that's a very important part of the story. And so that was something that we were, I was certainly cognizant as I was trying to tell this, working with, with the directors and with Julia.
Mm-hmm.
She's not a young man, she's a young woman. And when you talk about her being, somewhat mild or shy, I mean, some of that is just what's happening societally, what was possible for her. I mean, she wasn't Rosa Luxemburg, right? Like, there were very few of those. So yeah, how do we depict what's happening in the exterior, what can be shown, and also what's in the interior? And the only way we know that is because of her art, really. Had she not done that, she would have had these, roiling emotions and thoughts and feelings, but there would not have been a record left of them. But because we have that record, we have, these, the balance and the sort of juxtaposition between this sort of calm, placid exterior and a very tumultuous and fiery interior.
I don't know if any of you, Julia could probably answer this better, but how did you interest Keira Knightley and this incredible group of actors in this project?
This question comes up a lot, and I just, basically I have all of them as contacts on my phone. I just gave Keira a call, and the real answer is it is quite a collection of names and talents. I think it's a couple of things, and with me, I had never heard of Charlotte Solomon prior to being contacted, but it's sort of the thing where once you learn about her, you are immediately amazed that her story isn't a lot better known than it is. The things that she went through were incredible, and then you look at Life for Theater and her artwork, and you're like, sign me up. I think everyone we approached, and really Julia is a force of nature when it comes to getting the people that she wants. So we can't lose sight of that fact. But I think it's a combination of learning who Charlotte is, and oh my God, yes, I want to be involved in this, and the screenplay, which goes out to any prospective talent, was really well written, and was a great tool for attracting these top names. I think we all kind of have the same feeling, which is, well, Charlotte Solomon created Life for Theater in an effort to have her story live on and persevere, and in some way I feel like, and I think those involved feel like, we are sort of taking the baton from Charlotte and really, in a way, pushing her legacy forward as she would have wished, creating Life for Theater, which is a story about her life, which is a story about characters inspired from her life. So that's really what we did. We created a story of her life. And I think everyone involved was really happy to do that and be part of that legacy as Charlotte would have wanted. So, I mean, but really Julia is, she's just really good at what she does. And, she had a strong idea of the talent that she wanted involved. And by and large, everybody was like, sign me up,
Well, it does speak to the power of the story and clearly of the writing. Did you all know each other before this project?
No.
I guess not. I guess not. I think we were all brought in the same way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I've met so many wonderful, fantastic people through this process. I think that's one of the great things about making film as opposed to television, which is usually has a shorter window of production. We've now worked with each other for 4 years. Is it? That's insane. But no, but now we're all old pals. So.
I think the thing also worth mentioning is that Charlotte is an unusual film. So, by which I mean, it is a mature dramatic film that is animated. They're not, those films don't get made very often. And so what it meant is that people from different, parts of the film industry, much larger, end up being brought together. So I'm not an animation person. I've never done animation. And Eric and Tahir, I don't think have done much live action. I'm not sure how much live action you guys have done. Probably. So, but then we're brought together, and people bring their respective talents to this project that couldn't be made if it was just done, on my own. I couldn't, we all needed to be there. It's that sort of thing, and that their skill sets and aspects of craft that you discover while you work together. It's like, oh, live action and animation. It goes back to your original question. Well, it actually is quite different. The approach to telling a dramatic story in this way is, different than doing animation, series animation for children and that sort of thing, which is where most animation ends up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we all kind of learned from each other, and were brought together for a project that, again, is quite rare. I won't say unique. They do come across every now and then, but not very often.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, this has been fascinating, and your insights really enlarged my experience of the movie and what goes into it. And I thank you all for the work you've done, and thank you for your articulate responses to my questions. It was great talking to you all.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time and thinking so much about Charlotte and the film.